Then I taught on the Northwest Side in an immigrant neighborhood. And my favorite story is Daniel Marcucci. Daniel was Italian. I have all of these immigrant children, Italians, I had Irish, Greek, etc. And Peter Katsikas was the little Greek child. But Daniel was just a bad child. So Daniel's desk was next to my desk. Daniel's father says, you know what? If he gives you a problem, just beat him. Just beat him. I said, Mr. Marcucci, do you really believe that I am going to beat your child who is white and I'm black? Now, what I will do, Mr. Marcucci, is I will discipline him. I will let you know how I will discipline, but it won't be physical. And I will challenge him. What I found out was Daniel, like most rambunctious children, was also quite bright. He had a rap sheet, though, from kindergarten that said he fought all the kids and everything. So Daniel was one of those things. But I put his desk next to mine. Well, Daniel decided one day to take my money. I said, no, Daniel, you can't have my money. I just looked at him. I said, give me my money back. I didn't even ask him if he took it. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, if you don't give me my money back in 1, 2. He said, here it is. and he sat next to my desk the whole year. At the end of the year, Mr. Marcucci says, you know what, I want to thank you because Daniel has become not necessarily the best student, but a curious child. He was still rambunctious, but he was doing third grade work. So that was the one thing that I remember, again, because I believe Daniel was okay. He just needed somebody to care about him and to keep him close, because Daniel couldn't perform right if you let him get too far away. So I had to keep him close. Peter Katsikas was an Orthodox Greek child, and this was my first encounter with a language barrier. Got a little girl in March, straight from Greece. She didn't speak a word of English. Peter was my top student, and he was Orthodox Greek. So they spoke Greek in the home and in the church. So Peter became my interpreter. And that was my first experience and by the way, the neighborhood spoke a lot of different languages and everything, so that was it. Why was I in this immigrant neighborhood? This was desegregation of the faculty for Chicago schools. So I left the west side and got sent to the northwest side. And the neighborhood was primarily Polish with Italians, Irish, and Greeks. So it was a big Polish neighborhood, still is.
Did you see any correlation between the immigrant children and the African American children who you had taught in terms of many of their families were leaving certain circumstances and all of that? Did you see a correlation, or were the children in many ways the same, in terms of their curiosity, whatever?
One of the things I found out about working in that neighborhood was sometimes they had as many as 3 generations in the household.
This is in the 70s?
This is in the 70s. So when I think about that, for me in the South, that's what I knew, was maybe there would be 2, maybe 3 generations of individuals in a household, because I saw it. So that was something similar. The difference was this was, again, a segregated neighborhood. So it was a segregated white neighborhood on the northwest side of town, but it was also a middle-class neighborhood. What I found out and what I realized in retrospect was the first undocumented citizens in this country that I met were Polish Americans. Someone who would come over, the other family members would come over, and some of them own businesses and everything else. Now, are some of them documented today? I would venture to say that probably some of them probably never were documented in the true sense, but they just come over for a visit and stay. And the neighborhoods, they'd start their businesses, so there'd be 2 or 3 generations that the language at home could have been the primary language, and I found that to be the case. Daniel's grandparents lived in the house with them, and they spoke Italian. Peter spoke Greek at home. So I found that to be quite interesting. In today's conversation about immigrants, it is quite interesting that the only difference is that these were white immigrants and today's immigrants are immigrants of color. But it's the same immigrant community on its face when you look at it, or characteristically when you look at it. So those are issues that I learned back in the 70s